legend of Wawatosa Island. It was late in the moon of the harvest, one of those beautiful fall days that stretch out summer like a dog in the morning. The sun's rays were still warm, and the wind was crisp but brief. A young maiden from the nearby Wawatosa tribe was on the shore of what is now Shady Island, gathering the last grains of wild rice to help feed her people throughout the long, hard winter. Anawa, as her name is in this story, was very familiar with the waters of the Great Lake, as her family and tribe have utilized its bounties of fish, deer, rice, and maple syrup for countless generations. She knew every rabbit hide and fishing hole. She had explored every nook and cranny. But today, her mind was securely focused on the task at hand. So focused, she never saw the clouds on the horizon beginning to gather and froth like a rabid animal. Equally oblivious to the impending tempest was a young Wawatosa, newly apprenticed as a spiritual guide and medicine man for the tribe. He paddled a borrowed canoe slowly along the shore of what is now, and likely even then, called Enchanted Island. He was borrowing a canoe because he had never taken the time to make his own. Wawatosa was much more comfortable among the hills and the trees than he was atop the wind and waves, and this made his paddling stroke cumbersome and awkward. Wawatosa dipped his paddle in the water and, glancing to his right, saw Anawa threshing her last stand of delicious wild rice. Wawatosa knew Anawa from the tribe, but seeing her in this particular light, this fiery brightness with just enough shadows, he soon became lost in his thoughts. Anawa was now coming out of her days of work when she felt the wind, cold fingers stripping the warmth from her body. A storm was coming, and it was probably already here. She dug her paddle into the water and set off for the far shore to seek shelter. That is when she saw Wawatosa. He was just sitting in his canoe, staring. By now the waves had pushed him further into the middle of the lake, and still he did nothing, letting the water bring him further and further from shore. Anawa had to do something. Everyone has their talents, what they contribute to the tribe, what makes them who they are. Wawatosa was the land, and Anawa was the water. Anawa dug deep and skimmed across the waves. By now, Wawatosa had seen the beautiful girl thrashing towards him. He had felt the icy cold wind and could taste the fear deep in his belly. Suddenly, a rogue wave, 3 or 4 feet high, rises up from the once gentle lake and crashes the top of Anawa and her canoe. When the wave reemerges, Anawa does not. Wawatosa's arms sprung into action. His body had taken over, his mind a blank, because thinking isn't doing, and now is the time for doing. After a few paddle strokes, he ties a line to his ankle and dives into the murky depths. The wind and waves are still raging above, but below, the world is calm. No wind, no waves, but sadly no air either. Wawatosa was not a strong swimmer, but he summoned the strengths of his ancestors, and he parted the water looking for signs of Anawa. There, a shadow, not the billow of water plants, but hair. Chest burning, mind beginning to awake and take back control, Wawatosa reached for the shadow and fought to bring it back to light. Breaking through the surface, the young hero gathered the canoe with his left hand and threw Anawa into its relative safety with his right. He tried to follow her aboard, but something was wrong. His foot was stuck. The rope that had kept him tethered to the surface was now keeping him pinned to the bottom. With a great breath, he dove back into the darkness, again searching for whatever secured him. At that same moment, breath came back to Anawa. Gasping and choking, the water rushed out of her as the air rushed in. Not recalling the events of the past few minutes, she realized she was not in her own canoe. Wawatosa! She frantically searched for him across the surface of the water, but there was no sign. The wind began to crawl back from where it came from, and the water began to calm. Anawa dove into the water. She was a practiced swimmer and could hold her breath longer than most men could hold a baby. She dove and dove and dove until her arms and legs could no longer hold her head above water. And then she dove once more. The next morning, 2 canoes battered lightly against each other along the shore. Empty, but at least they were not alone. The sun's rays were warm and the wind was crisp, and things today seemed pretty much the same as yesterday. Except now, in the middle upper lake, right between Enchanted Island and what is now Palmer's Point, an island had emerged. The newly formed earth was a gentle roll of dirt and grass, trees like arms reaching out towards the sun, hollow trails through the woods staring back at the opposite shore, and a small, calm harbor embracing the water as if it were its own. Wawatosa was the land, and even death could not drown him. When the sun began to lose its warmth and the icy wind would grab a hold of the world, Anawa would sit around the big, warm fire, and her grandchildren would beg her to tell them the story of Wawatosa again. She would look out over the water lapping lovely against the shores of the island named in his honor, and she would tell the story again, just like I told you today.